presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and powered by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Welcome to the podcast, where former San Antonio police officer, author, and pastor Tim Rupp walks you through real-life scenarios involving our police officers and digs into the depths of facts and opinions on each case. This is Cop Talk, and it starts now.
Hello and welcome to Cop Talk, the radio show and podcast of the Strong Blue Line. I'm Tim Rupp, and in studio with me is Operations Manager for the Rev.FM, Mr. Gary Austin. Hello, Gary.
Hey, Tim Rupp, how you?
I'm doing well. Hey, Gary, we've got a special guest today.
Yes, we do.
He is not in studio with us. You probably noticed that. In fact, he's across the country from us, but we have him online here, and we're going to talk to him in just a minute. Excited to talk to our guest. He's an officer in the state of Georgia. So
yeah, very excited.
In just a minute. But before we do, we'd like to honor the officers who were killed in the line of duty on this date in history. And Gary, I've got Watchman James P. Van Duzen, New York City Night Watch, New York, end of watch Tuesday, June 25th, 1839.
Oh, wow.
1839.
Okay.
Not long after the country was formed.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, I don't have a whole lot of information, but here's what I do have. Watchman Van Duzen died from injuries he received when he fell through grating while attempting to rescue a citizen.
That's it.
That's all I have. I don't have his family, whether he was married, had children. I don't have his
my
age.
Goodness!
But New York City did remember him, and he died in the line of duty trying to save his citizen. So we honor him.
I'll be darned,
Gary.
So this is Deputy Sheriff Troy Phillip Chisholm. And he was responding to a disturbance call. This is end of watch Tuesday, June 25th, 2019. So he was responding to a disturbance call where he was shot and killed. So the suspect barricaded himself inside the home, and he was arrested and taken into custody without incident the very next day. He was convicted of Deputy Chisholm's murder and sentenced to life in prison. So he served with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office for 4.5 years. Also served as a paramedic and as a member of the West Central Special Response Team. This is Fulton County Sheriff's Office, Illinois.
Illinois, okay. Very good. Well, all right. So those are the officers we honored in the killed in the line of duty. Now, this history, June 25th. And June 25th, Gary, it has been great weather here.
It sure has.
And let me introduce our guest. Our guest is Officer John Masters. He's a police officer in the state of Georgia, and he wrote a book called Blue Line Rogue. And he contacted us about a month ago or so, something like that. And I was able to get his book, and I was able to read it, and very interesting read. And so we wanted to have John on to interview him about that. So welcome to the Cop Talk, John. And we know you're in Georgia. How is the weather there this month? Typically middle to late June. How's the weather there?
It depends on where in Georgia you are. It's wet. It's almost daily rain, and you just have to accept it. Bugs are everywhere. And, people come through here and they're like, "How do you handle this?" It's middle Georgia. You either like it or you don't. But in North Georgia, it's pretty decent weather. But I mean, this state is kind of weird for me coming from where I came from down here. I never thought it would snow in Georgia until I realized in North Georgia it does snow. You could set your watch to it. There's
really
that kind of blew my brain of like, I never would have imagined that.
Me either.
That kind of threw me off. Yeah.
All right. Well, anyways, we're happy it's mid-June because usually weather turns great here, and it has. It's been great. It's been great this summer. Kind of an early summer. Sometimes we don't get warm until July.
Right.
So it's really been pretty. And rain, we don't know what that is down here in the summertime, or up here, I should say, in the summertime. Anyways, John, why don't you share with us a little bit about how you became a police officer, and then we'll get into your book and why you wrote your book.
Sure. Well, it was kind of odd how I became a police officer. It was not a path I would have thought of myself going on. I spent the majority of my adult life in the military. I joined very, very young. I saw education opportunities. I saw stability, and I got those things. And when I left the military during my time in the reserves, and then completely transitioned out of the military, I used a lot of those education benefits. And most of my college training, my technical training, was around computational science, computer information systems. I was a database programmer. I either was working remote or I was working in a cubicle, and I was happy. I was content. Most of the stuff I did was finance. I would say probably at the time 90% of either the internships I was working on or then eventually later the contracts I worked on were dealing with risk management, Basel regulation, liquidity risk, things like that. And, at the time I was satisfied. I was happy. A course of events that I was not expecting would kind of push me into a feeling that I needed to put some skin into the game.
Okay.
And it's really simple what happened. One of my friends, we were both in the military. We were both from the same area. He was murdered while he was on active duty. The Army CID was amazing. They found his killer. They worked their tails off. They solved the case. And it just kind of told me, this is something I need to consider getting involved in.
Okay.
It personally affected me that I didn't want anybody else to go through that. And I began to look at crime completely differently, especially someone coming out of the military,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had looked at police differently as a child than I did as an adult. So my opinion of police changed from, these guys are just out here to stop us from having fun and whatever else, to these guys just caught my friend's killer. I have a feeling of some justice that my friend can rest easy now. And maybe I have a misconception of police.
Okay, well, yeah, that's unusual. I've never heard that kind of a story, and I guess I haven't heard this story about somebody because their friend committed or was murdered, and then they went into policing. I've heard stories about policemen came and they saved me or they did this and I was appreciated and I thought about policing, but it is kind of unusual. Matter of fact, it's very unusual. So, especially
I saw the work ethic of the police officers and the lengths that they went to find a stranger's killer.
Yeah.
They didn't know my friend, but to them, he was a human being. They were going to find his killer. And that, to me, I'm sitting here going, well, that's just Army CID. And I began to realize over the course of that year, that wasn't just Army CID. That is the majority of cops. We go out there with the intention of protecting and defending complete strangers.
Right. Yeah. And I appreciate that. And you bring that up. But with all that being said, then we bring up your book, and you've named it Blue Line Rogue. Now, Blue Line obviously is referring to police officer, but then you're saying they've gone rogue. So why don't you explain the story behind that book? And the book is available on Amazon, and so people can go there and they can get it on Amazon. We're not going to mention the names of the people who are involved, but we know John wrote the book, so he's, if you will, he's the main character in the book. He writes it in third person, but he's the one that wrote the book, and so he's in there. And the people who are involved are actually identified in the book. And so if you want to know who it is and all that other stuff, you can get the book, Blue Line Rogue, on Amazon. But John, why don't you tell us about the story behind the book and what happened and all that stuff as you go through it?
Sure, yeah. So at this point, I had been a police officer going into about 4 years. I realized most of people who are not police officers are going to think 4 years. You're a seasoned officer. No, you're not. Not at 4 years. You've almost barely broken yourself in. At 4 years. And I know there's if there's any cops listening to this and 4 years, I'm doing really good. Calm down, youngin.
Yeah. I know when I worked patrol in San Antonio, after I had 5 years on the police department, I felt like I was finally contributing to the cause, because I felt like I just wasn't, I felt like I was starting to become a productive police officer at 5 years.
Yeah, that's how I was feeling at 4, and now I look back on it, and I'm going into the latter part of the decade. I'm looking back at what I was 4 years ago. I was such a rookie.
Yeah.
But it was at the time I was working for an agency in Southwest Georgia, and what I was doing for that agency was specific counter drugs, counter gun mission. We were looking for felony narcotics and stolen guns, prohibited possessors, convicted felons, things like that with the weapon. And it was a very successful mission. My partner and I contributed to this mission very well with good intelligence, good street level intelligence. I was working with the ATF as they were tracing a lot of these stolen guns, and we were trying to get these stolen weapons off the street before they got used. I was feeding good intelligence to state-level narcotics investigators about where these drugs were coming from, how they were moving around the state. So, I was a cog in a larger investigation wheel that pretty much functions like a 24-hour machine, and they really rely on these street-level cops to, hey, I just found 4 pounds of meth. My post-arrest interview is here. This is the information I got from that guy. This is where he was headed. This is where he came from. This is how much cash he had on him. It looks like this was not his first stop. So, we're 4 pounds of meth in. Bag could hold about 12. He's got all this cash. He's been delivering and accepting payments.
Yeah,
that's really good intelligence for people to gather.
Yeah, and John, for those who don't realize it, you're talking about you working as a uniformed police officer, right? Driving a marked car.
Yes, it was very overt.
Right, and so
overt. I was in uniform. I would sit there at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, cruise lights on, takedowns on. I could have cared less how fast people were going. I was looking for a specific offender.
Okay, and that's one thing I wanted to mention, because a lot of people, if they're not into policing, if they're not an officer themselves or know people that are police officers, a lot of times you get this all your information about policing is from TV. And you think about drugs, and you think about the guys that are working narcotics and undercover and all that. But the biggest source of information is the street cop that's out there on the street. So, okay. So you and your partner are working this intervention in South Georgia, Southeast Georgia, and what happens?
Well, so this mission was very successful. We were finding massive amounts of narcotics, from cannabis to cocaine, methamphetamine. We were putting a dent. We were actually making a dent. In addition to finding heavy narcotics, we were also finding a lot of impaired drivers. So it was a good, satisfying mission. About 2 years into it, my partner started to notice something was wrong, and it didn't really click for me until I made a traffic stop that went in a different direction than it normally does. And at the end of the traffic stop, it was everyday run-of-the-mill interdiction stop. There's a roadside interview, narcotics are found, there's a trafficking amount of cocaine. It was a large amount of cocaine. Upon initial search of the vehicle, we found at least a third of a brick, going on to half of a brick of cocaine.
Okay.
So we're like, hey, this is great. We're going to take this car, we're going to put it in the lockup, we're going to come back and search it and see if there's any hidden compartments. Is there anything else in this car? Let's go ahead and take her to jail, because we got enough for trafficking cocaine now. We've got pills, we've got cannabis. We're good to go. Let's roll with this. Everything's field tested. So we're pretty confident, like, hey, we're going to come search this car. The next day, we've secured it. We've secured our evidence. We're going to come back. We're going to search his car because we've seized the vehicle. We're pretty sure we're going to find more. We've got this all mapped out. This is what we're going to do. I said, all right, game plan. So we roll with it. Next day, we're finishing up. We're getting ready to completely clear our shift, and then our plan was to go back to that car and finish our search.
Right.
And our plan got interrupted by the police chief. And that's when I started to realize something has gone wrong. By Tuesday, because the stop happened on a weekend, by Tuesday, that's when it dawned on me. The substance I seized on the side of the road has been swapped.
Oh, really?
I don't know with what. When my partner tried to take the substance that was seized to the crime lab, we found out that the police chief had given the lady her car back, undoubtedly still full of narcotics, and had given her her money back, had given her almost all of her stuff back except the cannabis and the pills. And he was now claiming that the white powdery substance that tested positive for cocaine was not cocaine. He's a police chief.
I'm going to explain this a little bit for people that don't understand. So you made a traffic stop, you seized the vehicle, you impounded it, sealed it off for evidence, and then what is common to do, and this is very common, you go back later and get a search warrant. Then you do do a search on the car where you do a detailed search where you can take apart things if you have to. And because you found so much, if you find a little tiny amount of cocaine that's generally used for like one or two people, generally they're just booked for possession of narcotics. But when they have more than just for themselves, whatever that threshold is, and it varies from state to state in the feds, then it's understood that you're dealing this stuff. You're not using it for yourself, and so it's a much higher offense. And with the third of a brick, this lady was not using it for herself.
Yeah, it was over 340 grams of cocaine, or of a white powdery substance that field tested positive for cocaine.
Okay.
So that's a lot.
And so you guys are going to go back the next day and take care of this. You find the police chief, and it's a small agency, but the police chief released the car and everything back to the lady except for the cannabis and the pills.
This happened over the course of several weeks. So the next day, our intention was to go back to the car. The police chief came out to another traffic stop, and he had given an order, which was the oddest order ever. The order was we were not to seal the evidence bags. That violates every rule of chain of evidence that we have.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter what state, territory, DC, every police officer in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, would tell you, we seal up our evidence.
Right. That's just common procedure.
Absolutely, we seal it.
Yeah.
So to be told not to seal it was automatically a red flag. Circumstances happened that next day. We couldn't get back to the car. In Georgia, we would not have needed a search warrant to go back to the car. We had probable cause. Under our state's case law, we were able to go back to it whenever we wanted because it was secured. When we found out that the police chief had given her our evidence back, really my evidence because I was the case officer, without even consulting with me, that just took us to I don't know how to describe the emotions I was feeling at the time.
Well, yeah, you're looking at something, and you went from a supervisor doing something that, well, maybe he wasn't thinking or something, to doing something nefarious like, oh my goodness, what is he doing?
Why are you tampering with my evidence? So at this point, I'm sitting here going, he's tampering with my evidence. Then when my partner goes to take the white powdery substance and the other items to the crime lab to get them chemically tested, because we now want to know for sure. We have a positive field test. Right. We want the proof for sure, because if it's not cocaine, okay, hey, great, we can drop a warrant, no big deal. We can go to the DA and say, hey, field test was positive. Crime lab saying it's not. The pills were all labeled, so we knew what those were.
Right.
And it was more than enough pills for distribution. It was not personal use. You know, they're in bags. It's like no. You're driving from one state through this state to get to another state. no, you're doing something.
Right.
All the indications were there that she was either a small-time trafficker or dealer, or she did this in order to get the amount that was needed for the year for her and her friends, and was distributing that way. Either way, all the earmarks were in the vehicle of, this is someone who does not use for personal. This isn't, someone you stop and you're going, okay, well, they got a couple pills. This is an addict. They're not impaired. Let's,
Okay, and so all this is going on, and the chief does this, and then I know you end up reporting that, and then you tell me that Georgia Post, which is police officer standards and training, they get involved with the investigation, and the investigator there does not do a good job, and you describe in the book how the chief who did all this has connections with.
We did not know at the time this was a very politically connected police chief. When my partner tried to take the stuff to the crime lab, the evidence that he took to the crime lab did not come out of the evidence locker. It came out of the police chief's truck.
Okay, so.
Right, that's a good clue. At that point, we knew something was wrong. Several days after that, my partner and I stumbled upon a report that was written that said that my partner had given the lady all her stuff back and not the police chief. Completely false statement. The guy wasn't even in the county, wasn't even on duty when this happened. So he's going, okay, we got too many felonies here. We got to do something.
Yeah, and now we're talking about.
My partner chose to confront the police chief. During that conversation, the police chief told us, and he was a little upset. The police chief was a little upset, is the wrong description. He was incredibly irate. He told us we were now going to be placed under investigation by the DA's office. We believed him. So we reported the whole thing to the DA's office. 2 days later, we were gone. 2 days later, after we reported to the DA's office, said, we have a problem with this case. I was fired.
Wow. So, and we're running short on time. So here's what we're going to do, John. If you want the rest of, I feel like Paul Harvey now, Gary. The rest of the story. If you want the rest of the story, go to Amazon and look for a Blue Line Rogue. And we're gonna tell you this, that John did get. He got terminated by the city he worked for. They came back later and they said, okay, well, he didn't get terminated under disciplinary charges. We just kind of let him go, and it all kind of worked out as far as letting you go. Your name was cleared from that, although that's not what happened with the police chief. He's still police chief. He's still there working. John is now working for another agency in Georgia. So obviously his name is cleared, because if it wasn't, he wouldn't have been reemployed later on as a police officer. But he wouldn't. He had to jump through some hoops. He had to do some things, and lawsuits involved and all this other stuff and different things. But I just wanted to have John on and to explain this to you, because as we've talked in times past on this show, Gary, we have brought about when we have rogue officers. We've talked about officers that have been arrested for things, and it's unfortunate, but officers are human beings like everybody else, and sometimes bad people just go into policing. And it happens like that, and unfortunately, that's what it is. But I want to give a shout out to John for being able to stand up to the police chief when he believes something's going on and report that, knowing that it could cost him a job, and in fact did cost him his job. Fortunately, he got cleared and he was able to get another job. So, thank you, John, for coming on and sharing with us, and thank you for writing your book.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I would just like to say one quick thing.
Sure, go ahead.
I think it's important for the public to understand that this is not the norm. These individuals are the exception. This is not how the bulk of the policing in the United States operates.
That's true.
You know, I don't want people to read this book and think, oh God, I can't trust him anymore. No, you can trust us. I just need people to understand that, look, the last 40 years of policing has created a situation where people who ordinarily would not have been able to become police have become police, and they may have been able to do things that now we're seeing the bad fruits of, and it's coming out to where people are going, wow, this is happening a lot. It's in the news, and it's like, yes, but you need to understand what's going on with law enforcement. We have a cultural issue where we are so short-staffed, we're having to make hard decisions. And I think we're seeing that in the last 30 years. People who ordinarily would not have become police officers have become police officers.
And I would agree with you.
Command positions.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and especially over the last 5 years. Since the George Floyd thing, that's really, it's hard to get people, good quality people, to become police officers. So we still need officers out there. We still need good men and women to do the job. Who'll do it honestly and do it right. And I thank you so much, John. And, you know, for coming in and wanting to go into policing because his buddy had been murdered. And so he went in because he was really impressed with officers, and he gets there and he finds a bad one. Anyways, thanks again, John. And thanks for listening in. If you have a topic or question you want to address on Cop Talk, send me an email. You can email suggestions, questions, comments, or complaints to coptalk@therev.fm. That's coptalk@therev.fm. Thought from the good book today. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Thanks for joining us and helping to make the thin blue line a strong blue line.
Cop Talk is presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and sponsored by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Questions and comments are always welcome by email to coptalk@therev.fm. Listen, follow, leave a review, and share this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or YouTube. And visit thestrongblueline.org to learn how you can be a supporter. Cop Talk is a Rev FM production, produced and edited by Gary Austin. Thank you for joining us on Cop Talk.